For those of you who don't know us, I'm Gordon from APACAI. We're a consultancy of eight, specialise in AI, agentic AI deployments, primarily in the people ecosystem. We can safely say that we have a wholly agentic AI stack of partners, one of which is whom GoFIGR with Helena. Um, but we're able to basically, through our agentic AI partners, deliver the entire people ecosystem as an AI solution. Now, the interesting thing about today, 2030, we're really at an inflection point, in human history. Uh, a point that's probably more impactful than what the Industrial Revolution was, for wholesale change across the way that humanity interacts with technology. Um, it's growing at an exponential rate, and we basically have really two camps on that side of things: those who are pessimistic about it, and those who are optimistic about the possibilities that this affords, humanity. So if we take the position, from that, fear and uncertainty and pessimism is easier to sort of buy into than optimism. But it also erodes our ability to be able to make, sound decisions, or in case, our own agency to make decisions. So we've really got the opportunity, by taking an optimistic approach, that we've got the opportunity to shape how our organisations, how our workforces, and how things transform for the better with these emerging technologies and AI platforms. So, like the Industrial Revolution, there are those who chose to adapt, to educate their staff, and then to adopt, and then be able to thrive. And I think it'll be very similar in the year 2030, and certainly it is already with many organisations and early adopters, that they have seen some incredible opportunities and some incredible growth due to AI. So when we actually talk about the organisation of 2030, we're not really talking about something that's a long way in the distance. It certainly sounded like a long way in the distance 15 years ago, but it's imminently around the corner, and it's strategies and positions that organisations are making or taking away, today, that are going to shape their organisations over the next 12 to 24 months. And before we know it, they're wholly adopted and either thriving, or working exceptionally well by the year 2030. So today, I want to look at what's going to look really different in 2030, and what strategies and bets are currently sort of, being adopted and rolled out and planned to be ready for those wholesale changes. So I'll throw this to our two panel leads today, Helena from GoFIGR and Linda. I'll let you sort of introduce yourself very quickly, but when you sort of think about the organisation of 2030, who do you think, or what do you think will believe, and about work, and that will be meaningfully different to what it is today? Who'd like to go first?
Oh, I'm going to let
Linda.
Helena go first.
Oh, we're all so great. Well, thanks so much for joining. I'm one of the co-founders of a career tech and workforce intelligence platform called GoFIGR. Amongst other things, we support with skills visibility, internal mobility, career path planning. But we just launched a new capability, so you'll see a little QR code above my head here. If you would like to understand AI's impact on your job, your skills, your future, give this a try. It's free. It takes 2 minutes. What do I think will look meaningfully different? I think stuff that we're already starting to see. So I think work is already starting to get unbundled and rebundled differently. If I even think about this app, this was a kind of idea and a concept a couple of months ago, and we were able to design this without a designer in 2 days. So all of the underpinning tech was there, but the design wasn't, and I would have had to have had a designer to do that. And between a couple of us and a really smart AI, we were able to kind of whip this up in a couple of days. So my job has extended beyond what I was originally, I think, set out to do. And so things like a marketing manager, as we understand it today, might look vastly different by 2030. I think the way that humans and AI collaborate will look quite different as well. It's all a bit accidental, experimental. We're in pilot mode. We're chat GPTing up things. I think that's going to get more intentional. And maybe before I hand over to Linda, today is the worst this technology will ever be. And it's already pretty amazing. So I would be hedging my bets that this tech is going to get better and better, more and more capable, and that's going to be equally thrilling and threatening to people out there who want to remain gainfully employed. Linda.
Okay, so Linda Chai, hi everybody. I'm a co-founder at Innovation Quotient. We're a boutique consultancy that was formed from essentially some refugees from large firms who ran tech-enabled transformation programs. Today, we're an end-to-end technology and AI service provider, and essentially for customers who are interested in how technology can actually accelerate their business strategy. So we do strategy work with companies, but we also do a lot of implementation. So it actually means we have to put our money where our mouth is. At the risk of actually making some predictions about what the world will look like in 2030 and having somebody throw this recording back at me at some stage in the future to say how wrong I was about the world.
That aged well.
Yes, we shall see. But I think there's a couple of things that I predict will actually happen. So the first one is I do think that we're going to want AI assistants who are like AI versions of ourselves to help us with our work, rather than having to deal with lots of different AI tools across lots of different platforms. So this is very much a technologist view of the world, but every vendor will say they've got an AI something inside their platform at this point in time. I actually think we will change the way that we will want to work. Instead of dealing with 3 different flavors of people, we're going to want like the AI version of ourselves next to us, helping us with our job.
Yeah.
I do think that we'll definitely see a lot of automation happening, a lot of codifiable tasks being automated, and then that will still cause us to figure out what it means to be uniquely human and what things should be uniquely done by humans. I think that's something that I don't think we'll have an answer to, despite the fact that 2030 sounds like it's a long way away. I think we'll still be working that one out. But my favorite one of this is I actually think HR and IT will realize at some point that they eloped accidentally. And that we'll actually be trying to figure out how to raise this child that we had together called the digital worker, or AI.
Yep. So what sort of positions are you thinking that, or are you seeing at the moment that organisations are currently taking to sort of ensure that even though they don't have all of the answers right now, but what positions do you think they're taking, or are you seeing them take to prepare for 2030 at this stage?
I guess that's me.
Yeah, that is. I just thought I'd run that straight through into the next one.
So I think the organizations that are being more proactive about this are realizing that there's an organizational muscle that needs to be developed that really is about navigating uncertainty. So there is a school of thought that, and every vendor will come to you and say, my piece of software is going to solve your AI problems, just spend money on me, it'll all be good.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that forces us into a position to say we're going to place bets on stuff, and we need to bet on the right technology and right platform. And in a world where every vendor is doing the same thing, there's that uncertainty creates the potential for paralysis. And I have seen organizations who have gone, actually, it's all too hard, I'm going to lean out a little bit and see what other people do, and then I'll follow the rest of the crowd. I think the ones that are going to be more successful in this navigation actually recognize that firstly, the decisions that they need to make to take positions are not decisions that only IT can take. They're not decisions that only HR can take. And they're not positions that strategy or ops alone can take. We actually need to build the org structures that allow us to harness a more integrated form of thinking to see where to take positions. I have seen organizations start to, almost in a back to the future sort of context, take a real options approach or a lean startup approach to looking at investment decisions and looking at how they can create the data sets that they need to be able to make good decisions about where to place bets. Mm-hmm. And instead of actually placing, big bets on things, they're taking a more strategic approach that is about taking positions in certain technologies or in certain options that are out there in front of them, so that they get the early warning signals coming back in that inform them to how to take the next step and the next step. So they see it as a series of incremental steps to essentially learn about the technology, but then and trusting that things will work, but also developing that mentality that says, I will verify what I think is happening so that I can then inform the next step. And that organizational muscle, I think, is actually almost the meta way that you can think about how to navigate.
Yeah, I mean,
in the future.
I think that sort of, is a common thread that, whether it's, whether you're consuming this, through Substack, whether through blogs or whether through podcasts, whether just, anyone else spend a fair bit of time on LinkedIn. There's a lot of very smart people out there with a lot of, very sharp opinions. And one that I'm, constantly seeing reiterated time and time again is that regardless of how great AI, may be, for work, workforce or workplace transformation, if you don't actually have a good data set and you don't have a good understanding of what the data is and where things need to be changed, which is all human driven, then ultimately it's sort of, as with any system, bad data in, bad conclusions, bad data out. Similarly, it's got to be with the way that AI is being adopted, inside an organization. You have to have a very clear understanding of where that, workforce or where that work architecture is going to be, changed before you can actually implement a whole new digital workforce, if you will.
Yes, indeed.
So look, I can jump sort of straight over to, that naturally leads to a question over to Helena. I mean, from the workforce data that you're actually seeing from GoFIGR's perspective, what early signals are you seeing from organisations that they're sort of currently building for 2030? They're being proactive about it rather than just sort of reactive, going, "Oh, sugar, we better get onto this right now."
There's sort of the vanity / external signals. So I pulled some Australian labour market data. I need to rerun that actually, but I pulled some last year because I wanted to see if what new skills were being asked for. And you can literally see the curve of when ChatGPT launched a couple of years ago, and then suddenly everyone's asking for AI skills. As a sort of sidebar, the most commonly requested AI skill in the Australian labour market is AI, which is a bit of a nonsense, right? Doesn't really help anyone. We're seeing a lot of senior level executives being hired in, and increasingly we're seeing lots of strategy and transformation and AI pop up in people's job titles, and it's now making board reports. There's a fun podcast I listen to where there's a sort of correlation between the amount of times a CEO mentions the word AI and like investor stock market like reaction to it now. So everyone's at it, right? So that's the sort of vanity. We're doing AI kind of metric. But I guess the ones that really are thinking about this a bit more long term are the ones that are kind of smart enough to realize that we're hiring all these clever people, we're running all these AI pilots so that we can insert your solution statement. It might be to save money, drive efficiency, build a new capability that you couldn't before, but they're smart enough to realize that this will impact people's jobs and it will impact the people you need, the people you keep, the people you retain. And they're starting to measure that kind of like task level impact so they don't get caught unawares in a couple of years and end up on the front page of a newspaper having made a swathe of redundancies because of big bad AI, because I just think that's going to be, I think the Australian public is going to, tolerate that less and less. So they're looking at the tasks that may be impacted and thinking about the sort of overall human impact. They're investing in things like upskilling and a skill infrastructure so that they can see who they've got on the table and they can start preparing this workforce for the future now. And HR and IT are genuinely collaborating. I won't mention names, but there's a company here on this call who've done a really smart job of aligning their people and IT functions. And I don't believe that every single company will merge that function. But increasingly, to your earlier point about, we just wrote a blog on it, actually, Linda and I, because we do see this as a kind of union and a marriage, and no longer can these two sides of the business work in isolation. The digital worker is a kind of, we have to co-parent this thing, and we have to design this thing, and we have to think thoughtfully about this thing. So I think we're seeing increasingly the sort of future thinking companies are really collaborating between their people and technology functions, and it's not just lip service. So those are some of the early signs I think that we're seeing. Linda, is there anything to add on that based on the interesting conversations we've had over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah.
I do think there's just so much uncertainty around this for organisations that it is difficult to say this is the way it's going to go. But I do think we need, I don't think any one part of the organisation is really good at building kind of these coalitions of the willing to co-parent this new child that we're going to put into the world.
So what sort of capabilities do you think, the leaders currently, today in preparing for this, need to build, to avoid, playing catch up so that they are proactively on the front foot? What are you seeing as some of those?
I think the ability to build a coalition of the willing on this, to great thinking from all the different parts of the organisation. Because if you think about it, getting AI into an organisation is actually really hard, right? The IT, from an IT's perspective, from the IT department's perspective, I can give you a tool, right? I can switch it on, I can put it in. We know how to do that. Like that's easy, but that's not the job done. After that, we need HR to essentially give this this new person like the culture that it needs to manifest, the behaviors that it needs to manifest, so that it actually lives and breathes the values that we want to project to the rest of the world. IT can't do that. It's not IT's set of skills. Yep. And then we need ops and strategy and those guys to actually institutionalize this creature so that it has the working knowledge of the organization to be able to actually be effective in the organization. No one department knows how to do all of that on their own. No one can do that on their own. And so if anybody tries to do it on their own, I don't think they'll be entirely successful. But the ability to, I suppose, create those coalitions of people so that as we put this technology into the organization, it has that well-rounded set of skills is something that I think we really need to get good at. Now, there are parts of the organization that probably have more skills in that space. So, transformation officers, strategy officers and stuff like that. Those guys have been doing this sort of work, but not to the degree that AI will require.
I mean, if you're looking at sort of how do you, adopt, onboard and bring on, bring into the fold, a whole group of digital workers, that are valued with your, that are measurable and as part of your EVP. How does the actual assessment or the auditing of that's got to be, when you're actually measuring, the efficacy of, how well that conversational AI or how well, that task tool, responding to emails, is actually working. That is it going to be IT or is it going to be HR, or again it's just that coalition of the willing, if you will, that working group that are going to be putting forward that assessment and going, well, it's meeting these assessment criteria, but we need to pick it up here and here. Who's that primarily going to sit with?
I think it actually needs to be a lot of people. I think we need to co-parent it. How's that?
but that's how jobs are changing, Linda. We've talked about that, right? Is that there will be tasks in many people's jobs that they may not even initiate anymore, but they have to supervise the outcomes. And even on the last webinar we ran on this topic, when we had the lawyer come and join us, is that who's ultimately responsible for the advice or output of an agent, and that's a bit murky for most people. But it is going to change jobs, because if you're even with your tech stack now as it stands, I'll take Salesforce as an example. Salesforce is launching Agentforce, and increasingly the tech does the job that the human used to do. So it's already nibbling into people's jobs, and we're having to supervise the outcomes, quality check. I don't feel too bleak about it. I believe we'll end up in this sort of machine, like a digital factory type of environment, where we're just sort of supervising AI outputs, but it's already changing people's jobs now. It's maybe not explicit, maybe the job title hasn't changed, but you can already see examples where an AI has crept in because your vendor, your tech stack is full of AI, really, like it or not.
I think we're seeing that with early adopters, though. So I remember reading an article about GitLab, tech company, obviously, and tech guys are the first to do this to themselves in many ways. So you see a lot of stories coming out from them at the beginning. But GitLab essentially produced a piece of software across the software development cycle. What they've done is actually put AI across the whole thing. So rather than saying this job needs to be split like this, they've actually gone, if this is all the stuff that we do, how do we put AI across all of the stuff that we do? And then what they've ended up with is, AI being involved in things like the planning cycle, the code generation, the development of code and putting that into production. But the human's role has shifted to being one of, I now communicate intent, what I want. I review what comes back out and make sure it's in line with the intent that I originally stated. And then I merge what has been created into the product that we ship at the end of the day. And that's
Claude Code can do that by itself now, can't it?
It can't. Well, it can't communicate intent, not the way human.
Got it. Yeah. Okay.
Communicate intent, and that, I suppose, that's what they did when they looked at, if this is all the stuff that I do as an organization, I've got to tell this thing to go do these activities for me. But that's a really different way of shaping kind of the world. Instead of going, this job, how do I break it up and reform it? It's actually looking at the end-to-end value chain of what I do as an organization.
Can I give you a silly micro example of how that shows up in our company?
Yeah.
It's really micro, right? But we have a career, a chat interface that supports with career, difficult conversations, one-to-ones, that kind of thing. It's one user interface made up of many agents. And one agent's job maybe is to summarize the conversation, another is to go and look up that person, another is to commit the conversation to memory. So it's not one agent, but it looks like it is. And we're in the position already we need almost like an org chart of what each of these jobs to be done is, because we could inadvertently change the objectives of one agent and it break three others, or we give them the same job. And so their instructions are kind of crossed over. So we're already, even as a small business, in the position where we need some kind of like org chart to tell us what jobs are being performed by this digital worker, to be able to sort of be able to see and manage, and not have someone in one team in one country build something that's at odds with another agent. It's as granular as that. It's already hard.
Yeah, and we're seeing with the work that we do, so we work with integration platforms from a tech perspective. That problem actually surfaced during the app world, where everybody was building apps, and all of a sudden we had apps on top of apps, and we had this problem of kind of this ecosystem of apps, and nobody knew which ones were connected to others. One of the big challenges that we're being asked to address is, how do I manage orchestration of all of these agents in the world? Because I'm using them in lots of different ways, and I cannot afford to make a change here and have that inadvertently kind of spiral out into a whole bunch of unseen consequences. So from a technology perspective, we're absolutely seeing the need for orchestration of these agents and the ability to kind of see a map of where they're working in an organization so that we can manage them effectively.
But Linda, as it relates to workforce planning, then, do you foresee that people in that role will need to manage, like, do these become the workforce, right? Does it become an extension of the workforce? So you're going to have to map. It's so hard to get your head around how that might look. It won't, isn't it?
Well,
I think it is, because so this is where my controversial point of view is going to come from. So please forgive me. Don't crucify me, guys, by saying this. But yeah, I think saying AI is a technology tool, I think is wrong. I do think it is a digital worker that we're starting to talk about. And this is where I think the co-parenting arrangement needs to come in. That digital worker actually becomes part of your broader workforce. And I don't think that HR or IT have the skills to be responsible for that workforce entirely on their own.
It's got to actually include basically human-centered design, UX side of things to actually, bring those together with IT, with HR, actually being able to co-design, sort of these. Sorry?
Human-centered AI.
Human, yeah, but ultimately it's still got to be human. It's about augmenting a human's job role or job description, or the ability to be able to, sort of manage their workflow better. And, very much, we know that sort of as long as there are humans in the loop within that decision-making matrix, that, you have less chance of having a complete workflow that can go off into different directions and go awry. But you have to look at things from, I think from a human-centered design perspective to be able to work out what that UX is like, both for, the humans who are interacting with a digital worker and, almost the digital worker so it knows how to interact with the humans from an EVP, as to, what is it to be us as this organization to ensure there's a consistency in the way that, the experience for workers, whether it's digital or whether it's human, is not diverging, too quickly. So that, again, you talk about sort of that co-parenting. I just think, there's got to be a very much a UX, a UI sort of interface, that's very much considered within that working group. Would you agree with that?
I do think that I do think all those parties need to be involved. Okay, I'm going to go off tangent for a little bit.
Right.
I do have a question. To your point, Helena, I think strategic workforce planning is something that we do need to do together, not just the domain of HR anymore. And I do realize I'm talking to a room of people in HR, and they're probably going to say, "Out of my dead hands, will you pry this capability from me?" And I'm okay with that. But I do think there's, like, I look at our own organization at the moment, and I think Helena and I've reflected on this before. There's an absolute privilege with being a smaller organization, being able to design the workforce of the future from scratch, from a blank sheet of paper, without having to transition an existing workforce at this point in time. I think the pathway for transitioning an existing workforce is actually going to be a far more difficult job. And I think we still have to design new solutions and new ways to deal with that. So I'm actually really open to collaborating with anybody from HR if you're willing to collaborate with somebody from HR, from IT, about how to actually make that happen. Because I think there is an increasing number of data sets that are coming to us, or that there are data sets that we need to create in order to make these good decisions. And I think we'll have to invent them. I don't think there are things that I can pick up right now.
So look, we're at that sort of, do you want to add anything on top of that, Helena, before I sort of jump us over to a few of the questions that we've got that we can bounce around, pre the webinar, and then we go to some chat ones and then a wrap up before we hit 2 o'clock. And then look, I think I spoke to both of you earlier. We can run through till about 2:20, 2:30, where we've got an absolute hard stop at 2:30 if there's enough questions, which there always seems to be with this. But is there anything you'd like to add to that one, Helena? That
only some things about I don't know, questions or concerns or early warning signs that I see in how the shape and size of organizations. So there's sort of two camps emerging at the moment. There's the automators. So there's the Amazons, who have, I think China has the most robots and AIs per capita, and then Amazon has the second one globally, like the second highest. So there's the kind of like race to automate, to rip out all of the cost. And as consumers, we're okay with that because we like having cheap, convenient products. And then there'll be the growers. There's a lovely IKEA case study they launched Billy the bot. It put 2,000 or 4,000 customer service workers at risk. They identified through the skills that those people had that there was a new service line that they could create, and they turned they sort of repurposed those people into interior designers, and it's a new profit center. So there'll be the growers, right? There's the automators and the growers. I'm a bit starting to get concerned about entry-level jobs. I know that there's a lot of bluster out there about, is it economic? Is it people, reducing headcount, to sort of deal with some of the overhiring that happened, or because we're not performing as well as we should be. But there's been a definite decline I can see in entry level and grad jobs literally since ChatGPT launched.
Yep.
And that has a knock-on impact. It's like okay now because we can kind of swallow that impact, but in 2 or 3 years' time, when we don't have a talent pipeline, where are our leaders going to come from? Who are our managers going to manage? No one's kind of giving that enough attention. And then if AI is nibbling away at their entry-level tasks, how do entry-level people learn? That freaks me out a bit. And then there's the kind of very human side of things, where let's just say you are a kind of like, I don't know, 40s, 50s person. You've had a lovely career. You're earning good money. You're like your relevance here in some cases is questioned. People are really feeling threatened by this, and that is a barrier to AI adoption as well. Because if suddenly you're in fear for your job, you're not going to let you're not going to let your fiefdom be undermined or whatever. So there's some really interesting human behavioral sides of things that we need to overcome, that will sabotage our efforts, I think. And I don't know, I haven't seen a lot of people talking about this. Let's say I just see the sort of stuff online like many of you do. So I do think there's some future burgeoning problems, and maybe we'll tackle it. There's a question I saw come in earlier about this one, so maybe we'll tackle it then.
Yeah, look, I think that there was actually a comment from Fran on there, so that one of the biggest pieces is actually in and around change management, because that is ultimately about organisational adoption. And if the change management piece is in there, designing sort of what success looks like, it ensures the adoption, and it means that we're getting a lot of these, these earlier deployments out of the POC stage, because at the moment, sort of it's literally 5-10%. If you listen to McKinsey, they usually have a fairly good opinion, but 5-10% are actually getting full traction, full rollout. They're just not getting out of the POC stage, and a lot of that has got to come down to the change management aspect and ensuring that there is a strategy as to how this is going to be rolled out and how it's going to be adopted, how we're going to measure it. And then most importantly, sort of how do we replicate it then across our organization once we're out of that POC stage? So change management is, I think, and again, it's always going to be people-led, because that's where the biggest pushback is going to come through, in an organization. One last question before we jump into all of the, and geez, there are a lot from everyone sort of prior to sort of while registering for the for the webinar. But look, last question, Helena. What are the biggest sort of planning assumptions that, if we're looking at that 2030 thing, what are the planning assumptions that you think are most likely to break between now and 2030 for the organisations that you're type of organisations that you're looking at, north of 2,000-3,000 staff?
Shall I start? Biggest assumption?
Yeah. That's what. Yeah, no, that's very much a specific one. What are the planning assumptions that are most likely to break, between now and 2030 that you're seeing?
Without repeating myself, I think that sort of entry-level talent pipeline that it's all going to look exactly the same in 4 years. I think that's a yeah. I don't know. I would hate to be a young person trying to find a job now. Anyone who's got kids here, I don't know. I feel very nervous for young people. I think it is naive to think that people are going to embrace this, despite how many promises that we make about how it's going to free up their capacity and it's going to be wonderful and so on and so forth. I met a wonderful academic who helped me with some of the work that we've been doing recently. And the top saboteurs of AI implementations, one is that you get crappy results or outputs, and that is because you haven't trained the person properly. That they're getting crappy outcomes or outputs. But second is fear of irrelevance. I don't think we should underestimate the fear of irrelevance. And I think I don't think job titles are going to matter so much in 2030. And I think already, even with the stuff we see in, I'll point to my QR code again, the predicted AI impact between two very similar jobs, like I've seen recruiters come in and marketers and all that kind of stuff, is really, really different. It's impossible to say on average that customer service is going to be automated by AI, or an average marketing is, because what happens in your company with the skills that you have, with your ambitions and your intentions, means that I don't know, no two companies, no two jobs are going to be impacted the same way. So I think it's a bit difficult to read some of these big sweeping headline statements about all developers and all recruiters and all of these jobs are going to be irrelevant. I think it depends. I don't know. That was a really muddled answer. So for a more coherent one, I'll hand to Linda.
Oh, thanks. Thanks a lot.
No pressure.
So I think the grad thing is very correct. Like putting our money where our mouth is. We've actually been looking at ourselves and how we build a talent school for ourselves. Because I do think there is a challenge where the way that we used to develop grads, particularly in professional services, is an apprenticeship model, right? You got to do the easy work, but what happens if the easy work is being done by a robot going forward? Who do we give to do the easy work to now? So we're actually looking at it ourselves and just going, how do we create and grow a pathway for our talent as they come in to us, because we absolutely need grads. I never want to be in a position again. I've been in professional services where we didn't do a grad cohort 1 year, and we felt the pain of that missing talent pool all throughout the entire career ladder for a good 10 years. Like it actually hurt for that long. So that's one of the things that we're certainly doing. So I don't necessarily have all the answers right now, but I'm working on the problem from our own talent pool. And I'm happy to share what we learn as we go through this dynamic experiment. I think the other thing though, and this is slightly controversial coming from a tech person, is I think there's a secret for why some of the POCs aren't actually making it into production. From a tech perspective, a POC is pretty easy to get together. Getting it into production is actually really hard because we carry as organizations a very large quantity of tech debt of things that jimmied together to get them live. And unfortunately, technology and AI in particular is incredibly unforgiving with the jimmying that humans do. And when you take the human out of the equation, all of that debt, all of those things that we did surface as barriers to us getting things into production. So I do think that one of the things we'll find by 2030 is a more realistic expectation of the pace at which AI will actually go through.
Or do we see some organizations sort of wholesale throwing out a lot of that? I love that term, tech debt, legacy systems, etc., where you're looking and go, well, if we were to amortize out what the actual cost, and the lost opportunity cost, which I think is also a big one. If it's going to take us 2 years to get over our legacy tech debt and integrate this without all of the roadblocks that we're having to overcome constantly or re-engineer, but actually let's just throw the whole lot out. And let's look at what we can do with a wholly automated agentic workflow that's then human orchestrated and driven.
The minute like a 2-person startup comes in and wipes out an industry, like the minute that happens, that's going to catch our attention. WhatsApp had 12 staff or something crazy before it. Didn't Instagram have 20 staff or something like that? Like the minute someone comes along with 3 staff and AI bits, I think we're going to be a lot less precious about holding on to our legacy products and services and ways of working. I don't know, it hasn't happened yet, but I don't think it's going to be too long before someone comes in and we see some examples of things being vastly shaken up.
Look, I think that sort of, and then circling back to, because it was a question that popped up repeatedly, you've both just mentioned it in that, sort of in that grad program on those junior side of things. Do you think it's actually, and designing apprenticeships, because that is what it was, an apprenticeship when you're entering professional services as a paralegal, similarly in a law firm or a finance perspective. But do you think, the modeling for those new apprenticeships is very much going to be around orchestrating the work, and it's driven towards orchestrating the work rather than actually just having to do the legwork and learning, because it's a big knowledge gap to jump through to go, hang on, now you're actually orchestrating a whole bunch of agents and learning how to be a conductor yourself rather than just actually doing the legwork. Because part of our learning process as a human is to actually go through and do those yards. You can't just expect to just jump there. But how does that apprenticeship potentially look? I know that's one that you're trying to solve right now, Linda, but
So I have a hypothesis with this that we're working with certainly with the development of our stuff, and I think it's the difference between uh, things that you learn deeply and things that you learn at a very shallow level. So there is the potential that if you start orchestrating things, you don't need to know that much. But then, how do you check that something is right when something goes wrong? Like, how do you fix it? And there's a lot of sci-fi movies around how, the elders built this great machine that looked after everybody. And, that was really great for a while. And then the machine started breaking down because it was getting old, but nobody knew how to fix it anymore. One of the challenges that we're having to bridge ourselves is as senior staff, because we had to go old school and we learnt in old ways before all the automation was present, we learnt things very deeply.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll have to preserve work for learning. I actually think we're going to have to be, we're going to have to like not AFI everything because some stuff has to be preserved to be learned.
Exactly. And that's what we're trying to figure. We're trying to separate out between what are the crucial things that we need to give to people so that they learn deeply, so that they can be effective as quickly as possible without having to go through the hard yards of, the years of doing monkey work and stuff like that.
And I think Tim's on the call from the Future Skills Organisation, and he and I have talked a lot about this. It's not just going to be grads we have to put through apprentices. I reckon adults are going to have to go through reskilling.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm convinced of it. We're going to have this for, it'll be our sixth career, and I'll need to learn something, pretty sharp. I'm pretty certain by 2030 my job will look quite different, and I'm reasonably curious. But yeah, if I'm not running GoFIGR anymore, I actually really think I'd need some help now reskilling and upskilling. So I don't think it's just our young people we need to apprentice through new career pathways.
Well, I mean, both yourself and Linda come from sort of that big consulting sort of professional services background. I mean, there's a question that came through sort of how do you see the world of billable hours, time, materials evolving between now and 2030? And why would clients sort of why would clients want to continue, with the current status quo, or would they prefer working with firms in a new way where there's a whole bunch of things that are automated and a whole lot faster? How do you think that's going to look?
So I have a hypothesis on this. I think the billable hours model has been under threat or been under pressure for like 20 years. I think it's just accelerating and getting worse. We're certainly seeing more fixed price work, more outcomes based work, and customers wanting to do more of that. I will actually say that it also requires a certain degree of trust on the customer's part and a certain maturity on the customer's part to trust us so that we can work that way together. But I don't think things like the billable hours model will go away necessarily. For very uncertain work, it's still a very legitimate commercial model between parties. I also believe, look, I'm betting my career on this. I also believe that there's still room for expertise in the world, and people will still pay for expertise. So, if I look at the professional services model more broadly, yes, there is a challenge to junior staff, and for a long time, I've had customers really challenge me to pay for junior staff. They'll happily pay for senior staff, but they won't always pay for junior staff, which is why fixed price models work a lot better for us. But I also think that people are moving away from the very large firms to the more boutiques who are expertise led in their nature, because that's what they have to be in order to make a difference in the world. And so, yeah, I do think that networks of experts will become increasingly consumed as well, because there's still room for somebody who has a viewpoint that sits across organizations, a viewpoint that's just tied to a single organization. That's one of the biggest questions I get every time I meet a new client. What are you seeing elsewhere?
Yeah, well, I mean that's.
Aren't we all going to be relieved when there's a blueprint to copy, right? If someone could just go first, please, so we could just all copy.
Well, I mean, look, there's actually a question I had specifically from one of our one of our attendees. What are some of the practical L&D or learning development strategies? And you'd have to be seeing this from GoFIGR's perspective, that are for leaders and employees to make AI adoption a success. And we talked about sort of the change management side of things, which is a big one. What other ones are you seeing sort of in the market at the moment with your clients, Helena?
I I think it's actually like co-creation. I think the minute someone feels that something secret's going on behind their back, that's the minute you kind of lose people. So um, even I did years and years ago before AI was a thing. I worked for a big recruitment company, and twice I had to go through the process of putting forward a business case for robotic process automation. Right, same but different. And the first time we did it behind our share services back, and it was really bloody hard because you were making assumptions about workflows and stuff that was happening without really understanding it deeply. And then the second time we did it, we kind of personified this robot. We called it Billy, I think. And we were like, what crap would you like to give Billy that really drains your energy, that adds no value, that finds really difficult? And they were fine. Like people would just not, oh God, this would have been 8 years ago. We assumed that people would freak out and be really anti, and they weren't, because there was just heaps of like swivel chair tasks and download and upload spreadsheets and just nonsense that added no value and no energy. So, allowing people to co-create and be involved in it, not doing it behind their backs, being upfront about what you know and what you don't know. So, is it going to change my job? Yeah, maybe. Are we going to support you? Yes. Like some of those things I think I see. And actually letting some of these people do it themselves. Like one of our clients has built via Gemini some gems so that even the process of instructional design of learning content is now mapped to the way that it's like a learning expert, and it understands the way people learn. And then it ingests all the content that they've ever created to avoid creating new content from scratch. And it delivers it in like a really, I don't know, amazing and compelling way. And then another AI kind of spins up the images to go with it. So, yeah, I think rather the ones I see having success are bringing people on the journey rather than doing AI to them. Yeah, so those are some of the things that I see. One company actually, a legal company over here in Australia put forward like a prize. They actually put forward a bounty. So if you could find something in AI fight, there was a sort of cash prize, and that was a big incentive.
Yeah.
Quick question, because we did touch on this when we were having a sort of pre-chat on this about a week ago, and it leads on from one of our attendee questions. But will we actually get to a point, very soon in the future, maybe next week, where we get sick of the AI interactions, because it's getting closer and closer, especially over the phone. That you don't know that you're actually talking to an AI. It takes a little bit of time to actually click, but where we're actually, craving those personal connections. And I can't remember whether it was you who said it, Linda, or you, Helena, but you said maybe we'll get to a point very soon where, similar to B Corp certification, we have some form of certification for companies that we are human-led,
Organic.
We're wholly organic. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yes, I think is the short summary, but we're still going to be fine with AI taking over some of the sort of like, I don't know, like, I'd never call my bank anymore, and I don't know, my Wi-Fi went down. I'd far sooner be able to kind of self-serve my problem at 10 p.m. or whatever it is, rather than actually have to go through the process of explaining something. So there's some things where, it's just more convenient. I've even seen surveys where Gen Z and younger are like, they trust an AI more than they trust their boss, or they'd rather receive a clinical diagnosis from an AI than a human. Like, it boggles my mind that might be the case, but I do kind of get it. But and then on the other hand, I have a guy who helps with blog writing for me. So about 90% of the content that we put out in the world, I write, but I'm not an SEO expert. And so we have a guy called Chris who supports with one or two SEO optimized blogs a month. And when ChatGPT came out, he was like, oh, holy hell, I'm doomed. And already he's winning business from customers because they don't want AI slop. Like, you can spot it a mile off on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Google's already penalizing AI slop. So yeah, it's already come around full circle. I think that there is a space for human expertise. And we also talked about this earlier, didn't we, Linda? About if we're all using the same 8, 10, 12 foundational models to build our tech upon, because we're not all billionaires that can build large language models. We're going to be one of 12 flavors. And where do you differentiate there? It's going to be your humans that actually differentiate once the AI has taken over all the nonsense. So yeah, there's my view on it, my weird and wonderful view.
So
Right.
the best story I've got to contribute to this was I actually contributed to a piece of AI in healthcare research at one stage with one of the universities. And what was fascinating to me was they actually did a survey of people in terms of whether they wanted an AI interaction or they wanted a human interaction. And what they found was that it's definitely generational. So if somebody of our generation is diagnosed with like terminal cancer, we want a real live doctor to tell us, and we want the care and the empathy. But there is a younger generation that actually prefers a robot to tell them that they've got cancer, because they wanted to act out in front of the robot and they didn't want to have to care about the emotions of the other party. And I think it's really telling that we're all raised differently with different expectations, different social mores. And I think it's difficult for us to be able to say, yes, we all want a more authentic human interaction. I think each buying segment or each customer segment will want a different experience based on what their expectations are. And we just need to be sensitive to that. So we've got the skills to do this. It's just a question of understanding more about what different parts of the market actually want and then catering to that accordingly. But yeah, I was really floored when I had somebody actually say they would prefer a machine to tell them that they had terminal cancer. Not my experience, but
Yeah. I'd rather not have to know what it's like to be told about terminal cancer. And I'm trying to put myself in the shoes and go, well, if you're dealing with an AI, you can just drop your bundle completely. As the kids would say, you can have a complete crash out. The AI is going to be infinitely patient with you. It's not going to feel offended. It's just going to go, well, this person's going through something. That's one of the things, that infinite patience. And, in certain cases, it's not so much designed empathy, but it sits within conversational design to sort of naturally empathize a little more than a very busy human. And if you've got 15 minutes to break it, hang on, I allowed 20 minutes to break it to this person, they've got cancer. Whereas the AI will sit there and let you rant rave for 25 minutes, half an hour. It's an hour. It doesn't really matter to the AI. It can have 500,000 conversations simultaneously. So it's just there to break the news to you. Sure, I can understand sort of both sides. I'd rather, yeah, I think I'd still prefer the human touch, but then that's a generational thing, right? That's a generational thing. Look, we're getting sort of towards the end of our time, or at least for the set time that we've got for this. So I'll ask a sort of wrap up question. I'll let everyone know that I will be sharing this and emailing out the link for the whole webinar, which will also have the whole chat. Because, geez, if you haven't been following through the chat, there's some fantastic comments in there, and I've even still got a few more questions that I wanted to get through. But if I was closing out in a single line, before we sort of get onto some additional chat for say another 20 minutes, what gives you sort of the most, optimism right now, or the most concern about organizational, the future of work right now? Who's going to go first? Linda? Helena?
Helena, come on.
Come on.
I think I've already said my pessimistic stuff, so maybe I won't repeat that.
Okay, I'm going to be the optimist then.
Yeah, so I've said that. I love being able to do things I couldn't do. I know I'm not a designer, but I love being able to get an idea out of my head and that my team can build it within like a day or two now. I love the speed and the extra capacity and the ability to be a little bit superhuman. Um, and I love being kind of a bit more competent and capable than I used to be. And I think when I posted about this before Christmas, and there were other people like that saying, I love it. I can do all these things. I never could. I could code. I built a website, all this kind of stuff. But I worry a little bit about how dependent I am on it now. And I worry about whether my brain is going to addle because it's a bit of a crutch for me. So I'm optimistic about new opportunities for people, for companies, for individuals, for skills, for pet projects, for all of those kind of things we wish we could do and we can't. And I worry that I'm going to get dumber because of AI.
It's a critical thinking thing, right?
Yeah.
But and there was a comment in the sort of in the chat there. I think it was from Annette. We've got to have a greater focus on critical thinking in school because so much of the actual legwork can be done. And I think that critical thinking, and that's where the expertise and the professional expertise that we have as our generation and older people is that we've gone through the hard yards, we've gone through the learnings, and having that critical thinking expertise to prompt or challenge, the right questions, is what sort of allows us to sort of help shape things without sort of falling behind or falling too far behind. But where it comes to that, the future of the work, as Helena just said, she's worried about, you know, am I going to get slower because I'm allowing AI to do a lot of that legwork?
A good question. Full disclosure, I'm actually the mother of homeschooling kids. So this was really curious to me, but I think it was in the UK, they did brain scans of kids who used AI to support them in doing their schoolwork and kids who did it the old-fashioned way. And they did actually notice a dimming of the brains of kids who used like ChatGPT to support them in homework. Now, there are many reasons for why that could be the case, but there is like that question as to whether your brain is being turned on that much if you're using something like ChatGPT to support you in that work. I think, though, that I have faith in humanity and I have faith in humanity's ability to be ingenious because we have been before. And so that's what gives me hope that this uniquely human spirit of overcoming the adversity that gets put in front of us, we will find a way through and we will get there. So I'm probably more optimistic than most in that respect. But history tells us that we've done this before and I don't think we'll get dumber. Helena, I don't think you'll get dumber.
Okay, I'm encouraged.
So look, we'll just jump into a few extra questions as we've just gone past that 2 o'clock, sort of.
And people should feel free to hang up if they need to, of course.
Yeah, people feel free to hang up. People feel free to sort of raise their hand and sort of jump in or just say they've got a question and I can throw that to you because I think I'd like that sort of just on an open side of things. Fran, did you have a specific comment? I know that sort of having had you on 2 other webinars, I know that you've generally always got something to contribute.
Sorry, I feel like I'm this like, oh, this is so interesting. No, I've actually just found out this morning that I have been confirmed as a speaker at the Australian Institute of Training and Development to talk about future organizational structures and how you can use AI. How do you design organizational structures to incorporate AI and the humans? And there's some work I've been doing with another person around how that might look. So I won't give away too much at the moment because it's still fledgling, but it's very much of this moment. I'm an org development expert by background and change management and a human resources person. So this is so timely. People I'm seeing out there just don't know what to do. And Helena's point at the beginning about AI being the most kind of in-demand skill. I met with someone yesterday who said a board asked for 3 AIs. I'd like 3 AIs, please. So
just three.
Just the 3, please. No. So I think there's a huge amount of upskilling, but also, yeah, I agree with Linda. It's like humans find a way, they find the path of least resistance, and there'll be a lot of interesting work for people that want to get on board. But I honestly think is it the neurodivergent, the different thinkers? Is it their time when it's been a lot of history in capitalism around convergent thinking and doing it a set way? Maybe that's the social shift as well as the economic and technological shift. And a lot of these platforms were designed by potentially neurodiverse people. So I think it opens up some more engagement and inclusion around there. I'm positive, but there's going to be some losers as well.
There always are whenever the massive technological shifts come along.
Yeah, but we have had it before, and this is why I think it can't be. And to Linda's point around that, it's not the technology; it's like seeing it as a worker as well, but it's absorbing it into this. There's so many facets of our society that it's changing, and that's why I like looking at it from that bigger and even that historical perspective to kind of get a grasp on I think a lot of things are going to have to be reinvented. It's just these ones, we're just trying to cling on to old structures that are probably not serving us and not going to by 2030.
Mm.
So if we have to design from first principles. How to teach the kids how to go from first principles again?
I had a coffee with a friend this morning who said this is all these little snippets of like verbatim information. She said she's in her mid-50s, she's got two kids in their late teens, early 20s, who are struggling to find work at the moment because their degrees are like one of them's in content marketing and I can't remember what the other one's doing. And her daughter said to her, Mum, what would you do about this thing? And it was something like, you know, general information that your parent would know, maybe. And her mum said, oh, I do this. And she goes, oh, good, that's what ChatGPT said as well. So using us older people, this is our role. And this is the other bit about elders. Like my partner's from a Nepalese background, and the role of an elder in communities is quite different in like different cultures. And I think white culture has lost that sense of eldership. So is that a resurgence that we get as being you know, wisdom and elders she remembers pre-AI. She has the official truth, not the AI slop regurgitated truth. And there's a role for people that keep their faculties about them. Helena, with your keeping your curiosity and not getting an adult brain.
Well, we'll see. I chatted to a guy in the UK about this in terms of like what will the future look like and what jobs will be protected. He's coming. We're doing a UK version of this later this evening, and he's got some really interesting thoughts on it. Like he thinks that there's going to be a boom into the trades. So, you know, physical, you know, manual labor, care, healthcare, that's another safe one, right? Or at least at the moment, we're living longer, you know, we're getting, I don't even know, we're not necessarily getting sicker, but we're living longer and we need to be taken care of. He also thought that though the military, roles in the military would increase. Maybe that's just a bit of a sign of the times right now because, you know, the world has gone a little bit insane. But he saw a rise in defence force jobs, and he had a different view to me about young people. He's like, if you were in a company and you could have like two or three smart young people who are sort of tech native, fearless, why wouldn't you have two or three of them and sort of get rid of a couple of your senior managers instead? It was quite interesting to hear quite an alternative view on that. Yeah.
That was one of the comments that earlier in the chat was that I wouldn't be worried too much about the some of the younger generation. They're going to be AI native, which means they're coming in knowing a whole lot more because they've grown up with it. You know, it's similar to sort of, you know, take it, you know, my career sort of starting off, you know, we just saw the birth, you know, of the internet, you know, 3 or 4 years later, or maybe it was 5 years later, but you know, we had to adapt to it. But those kids who are coming through, by the time you know you're 30 years old, you've got 21-year-olds who are coming through who've grown up on email and the internets and whatnot, and
Surfing the
going,
web.
wow, how do you do that? How did you? And that's always been one of the things that I've loved about having, you know, younger team members who are digitally native and whatnot. Is, hey, how did you do that? Show me how you did that.
Mentors.
Can you
Don't you
teach
feel
me?
old though when that happens, right? When someone young
No,
does something,
no.
you're like,
Look,
oh my God,
look. I
I am
think you
100
get
years old
stuck.
now. Yeah.
You get stuck in your ways, and you get stuck in that particular rut or that way of doing things. And someone comes along and goes, here's a better way to do this. Why don't you try it this way? You go, geez, how did you do that? Show me.
You should
No,
That's
feel
that's
old when
awesome.
a partner at a bloody professional services asks a more junior team member for the millionth time how to PDF a document. That's what you should feel embarrassed about, not, oh, I actually don't know how to do this. Teach me. It's like reverse mentoring. But that's the other thing is like 5 generations, different learning styles, different. That's really interesting about like, I think you're right. I think it's care work because my first job was in an elderly care home and the people are not getting weller as they're getting older. And I think there's a huge so care work. Military is interesting. I hadn't thought about that, and that probably is linked to that scarcity of resources in terms of how do we keep our data centers and sovereignty and all that stuff that's kind of coming around at the moment. I don't know if that is time bound. The comment I put in the chat that a friend in New Zealand told me yesterday in a really small like wine growing town was it's almost this kind of rejection of these. We've seen the old orders and structures and systems and traditional institutions like this year 11 kid, like 16-year-old was told like you'll never make it anything more here. And she's like, good, I'm going to go and work at this accounting practice. And then she's doing what Linda was just saying, like leading AI teams because it makes sense to her brain because she's just been brought up on it. So you're like, oh yeah, I just like we used to like have struggled to build macros and all that stuff to do workflows, and she's just like, I just told Perplexity to do this, and now it does this and this, and you've got more senior people checking her work, but she'll be earning six figures within by the time she's 18, 20 probably, because she's then got skills that are in demand. I'm not worried about the next generation. There will be ones that don't, but
Yeah, they'll sort themselves out.
I was
yeah.
going to throw over to Ian. I know he's been sort of ready with a question or at least a comment. He's never short of a comment in my.
Yeah, I've just rethought my question. Mine was about long-term leadership, availability to long-term leadership. But bringing back, I mean, I'm ex-military. I used to mentor people leaving the armed forces and help them write their resumes. They have an amazing set of skills that they traditionally don't know how to translate into a civilian world, you know. And regardless of what goes on with AI, the military will always train towards the what if you don't have this
Yeah,
scenario.
Mhm.
So, for
problem
instance,
solving.
what if you lose your internet? You can't pull up Gemini or ChatGPT in the middle of a battlefield and say, how do I defeat this enemy? That's just not going to happen. They get taught how to think on the fly.
Yes.
And to do that, you need to have an insane amount of knowledge. So I think the skills of people leaving the military will become more and more important to commercial stuff. And there are some organizations out there that specialize in bringing ex-military people into the workforce. They tend to have a better work ethic and so on as well. Um, but you get trained. What if I lose power? What if I lose my missile systems? What if an EMP pulse takes out all of the satellites and I lose my GPS?
As we used to say in event planning, with large ones, plan for the worst, hope for the best. Plan through all of the negative scenarios, plan through where everything can go wrong, come up with a risk mitigation strategy as to what you're going to do. If this fails, then what? And then if 90% of everything else goes right, the 10% where things fail, you've got a plan for, and you can move forward and everything is kind of successful. But it's a different methodology in thinking rather than just assuming everything will just keep going as the status quo.
I tried mapping this out. I tried mapping out everything that I could think of, like that we'd considered when we launched our own AI, which range from like all the way from which model do we choose and all of this kind of stuff to do we even have a business in 5 years? If AI does what AI is like, will there even be a need for us? It was all the way up to the existential, and it's hundreds of questions long. And if you think about that as well, about I don't know, the US military is a good example. They've just done a deal with Grok. Well, Grok just needs to do a couple more insane things, and they're going to have to yank that out. But what will they have built in, and what will be the repercussions? So there's going to be jobs created out of all of the what ifs and now what's and stuff like that. And it is super interesting.
Mhm. And I think AI in general has got a ridiculously small number of failure points. Um, just basic connectivity. That can be interrupted in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody takes down Starlink. The Russians have already been dredging up undersea cables.
Yeah, that was North
They
Sea.
got caught doing it. They got caught doing it the other week. If we lose that Southern Cross pipe and the one across to Singapore, we're stuffed. And they're not overnight fixes either.
And that's maybe
So,
that focus on that this sovereignty and the securing your resources to like becomes even more important. Maybe, yeah, that is the growth in the services to that's
yeah,
interesting, yeah.
yeah.
And the other one I was thinking of is I don't know if anyone else has I do HR kind of exec work as well. The amount of like I'm literally saying to companies like if you can get an AI agent in, do, because the amount of legislation that's come in that is making it so hard to keep employees and employ them without claims coming up left, right, and center is like it's driving like think like this psychological safety stuff. It's almost like if you could start a business now, don't try not to hire employees. In Australia in particular, it is so onerous. The legislation, the tax, the cost. It's
The
just
perfect
like, I know it
storm,
sounds
right?
awful, but yeah, it's
It is
literally
the
the perfect
perfect
storm of
storm.
people are put off by it. And
Yeah.
then, and I think one of you said about the earlier point, I was speaking to this guy last night who does like AI and kind of guardrails, ethics, kind of strategy advisory for risk. And he said things like combat keeping, and it was like, oh yeah, using AI as the excuse when actually it's not AI, they're just trying to cut head because they're not necessarily performing and financial results and stuff. So it's a very odd time. And if AI hadn't been come around now, it probably wouldn't be as weird, but there's all facets of economic and social and like life changing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm an
No.
HR person who I like people, but it's hard when you can't actually run a business because people like I was offended. Well, I'm offended, you're offended. And you're going around circles and it's like I'm not surprised if leaders just go, I'll just hire an agent to do that because I'll implement agents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of companies now are talking about they're rethinking every time they go to a new hire, say, can we do this with an agent? Do
Yeah.
we have to use a physical person? They don't
Yeah.
throw sickies, they don't take leave, they work 24/7. They're not offended by anything.
The offence is. I had someone raise a complaint because someone said this the other day, stop blowing smoke up my ass.
Mm.
That was someone saying I feel unsafe and I want the person to lose their
Yeah.
job. Madness.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's sort of one of the ones is, that keeps popping up is how do organizations, essentially protect, makes them unique and different, their standards, their taste, their decision patterns. So how does that actually survive, sort of AI turnover and implementation of agents, it's coming back to that sort of, I wouldn't say, unholy matrimony, but that child in the digital worker with the marriage between IT and HR. But sort of how does how does a company's sort of EVP and culture sort of maintain with all these new digital workers?
I think this is a bit of an unlock here, though, potentially, because you can do hyper personalization at scale, like Google Learn Your Way. You shove in a textbook or a PDF, and you answer a few questions about how you like to learn, and it refactors that document into a bespoke learning asset. So if I want to learn economics through the lens of basketball analogies and I'm a visual learner, I can have exactly that. So actually, we can't yet imagine that because we're not Google, or we lack the imagination because all we can think about is automating the thing that we do now. But yeah,
I
those who
think
get it right.
there are
Yeah.
connections people are making though, because I saw something this morning that was like it's like the inspiration. So a couple of things. I've got a business. One of my clients is an art consulting business, and they're doing
Mm.
really well because one of their part of their business is digital art. So in terms of the physical space and driving people together. And they're a really small team, and they're going, well, we can actually do more and it's the willingness to adopt AI to supplement, and they will come across as like a 50-person team because they can get so much done in
Yeah,
terms
that's
of their
really cool, isn't
marketing
it?
presence, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So there's those kind of things, but there's also the inspiration of like you just saying that idea, that hyper personalization is for creative people. It's like, oh, you could do that. So you could do this with it. And then more like almost
Yeah.
wealth creation happens because new business ideas come about from it. Like the business you set up and then doing like you had that because of there was connections being made. And how do you um kind of map out what a workforce capability and planning is and using AI to do that? That's been a nightmare in HR teams for as long as before I've been in HR. It was like, so I think there's this idea of like wealth creation out of creating new wealth, not from mining existing wealth or selling the assets of old, it
Mm.
creates new opportunities. So that's the other way of looking at it, I suppose. Sound like
Do,
Pollyanna
do,
today. I'm not normally.
do we think companies need to start thinking about including the adoption of AI into the BCP, the business continuity
Mm.
planning? If we
Well, not when
replace
you
a
only want
whole
three
segment,
AIs. A lot of them
yeah,
don't
but
know. You only want three AIs.
well, if you use AI to
It's a good point.
take out a whole portion of your workforce at the lower end, what happens if you lose that AI? What happens if
That's what led me to do that weird mind map, Ian, which is to go through all of the what ifs.
Ooh,
Um, yeah, like what if a provider goes nuts and does something reputationally damaging? How do you yank that out really quickly? I don't, who was it saying earlier on? Like One of my friends for ages was earning a crap load of money as a Lotus Notes developer because there was like 10 of them in the world.
Yeah.
So, do you know what I mean? I don't think people are necessarily thinking about this yet because it hasn't happened. It's like COVID. It's inconceivable.
You're
Mm.
so right, the
It will have
BCP
happened.
stuff.
Yeah, it's a
But
black. It feels
again,
like a black swan because we're not far enough in the journey to imagine that it could happen.
Until it happens, and then everyone goes, "Oh, we didn't think of that."
Well, you know what
Like
they
you on
say,
COVID.
if it exists, it will happen.
yeah.
Yeah.
Nuclear weapons exist. By default, somebody's going to use one at some stage.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
See, the
Um,
doomsday clock is
yeah,
it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Just a tick
yeah,
closer. But look, I mean, and again, that's that whole pessimistic side of things. And there's those who are in the camp of AGI is going to literally, that is there's some are saying that 60%, 70% chance of essentially ending the human race. And certainly the question that always ticks over in my head for AGI is if it is going to consume all human knowledge, then everything it's seen, at least as far as what we've consumed as mass media, en masse in the way of rich content being films, it prevalently does not paint AI in the greatest of frameworks, whether it's Matrix, Terminator series, her any AI film of the last 20, 30 years. Um, and it has the ability to be able to reason. It's going to go, well, humans don't really think very much about AI, which is great. That's not cool. But coming back to a thought that was on this podcast that I was listening to the other day around sort of an AI doctor. You basically have the best diagnostician with the sum total of all medical knowledge, literally instantly accessible, infinitely patient. And if we're not talking about critical care, where we're just talking about sitting there with your doctor and actually diagnosing, I've got these issues, it's hurting here, I get this, I get that, it will run through, a million different permutations, as to what could actually possibly be the disease or the potential ailment that this person is experiencing.
Well, yeah, and then you plug like these in your
Yeah,
garments with all the health data that's coming
yep,
through now, and you're
yeah,
like, why would I go to my doctor that tells me I've got cancer over the phone, as I said in the chat?
yeah. Well, I don't know whether my Garmin's not going to tell me whether I've got cancer. It is telling me that I'm, probably stressing a bit too much. And hey, I look at those numbers and I go, hey, I've only my stress levels are at 18 or 19 today. That's a really good day.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a
But
really
things like you can do your heart rate variability on here. You
yes,
can do
the
your
HRV in there.
sleeping respiration.
Yep.
My partner's got yeah, so or what's the other one? Your heart like so it's that's the thing is we've got all these things. It's actually weird. It's almost weird that we're not sometimes I don't know if anyone else feels this. Sometimes it feels like because of the amount of like information out there, it feels like we're further ahead than we are. And then you're like, damn it, where is my automated car that can just pick me up? I don't want to drive today. Does anyone else feel that? Or I'm just like, all the hype has made me
You've
think
seen
that we're
the automated delivery vehicles in China dragging along scooters that they've run over, or
yeah.
just
Oh no,
going
I
down
know it's all
roads.
there. I mean, they've had it in the States and like I met people 10, 15 years ago in Croatia that I was like, you guys are living in the future. You've got the automated cars in like Silicon Valley already. You've got the Amazon store where they were just picking stuff up and it would walk out and they'll take it out of their bank accounts. But it's sometimes you read all the hype and you're just like, it feels like the world is too slow for the amount of hype that's out there for me sometimes. And then I have to slow down and do some cooking and spend time with my dog and yeah.
Well, that's where we do have some of the kind of weird and wonderful innovators to thank, right? Is like,
Mm,
whatever we think of the Elon Musks and so on and so forth, they do kind of drag us forward,
yeah,
not always willingly.
not always ethically.
Yeah.
Not always in the right direction.
I'll,
There's a
I'll
lot of
use
caveats
that.
there.
I'll use the rising tide and all boats lifting, as an
Yeah,
analogy
true.
there. But
This is true.
there's always going to be some downsides as well. But as a collective movement, I think it's moving it's moving the right way. I mean, you
For
can
small,
either
yeah.
be
For,
fearful, stick your head in the sand.
mm,
You're not going to fight against it. It's not like, everyone's going to come, all organizations who are developing, or heading towards AGI at the moment are all going to agree and sign binding heads of agreement that we're all going to stop this or slow it down. Someone's going to be there first. Whoever's going to
mm,
be there first is going to have a critical first mover advantage. That is a fact. So there's no point in anybody else going, we're going to slow down.
mm.
Someone has to get there first. And to use the analogy that an American would throw in there, it's better to have a good AGI than a bad AGI. It's like a good guy with a gun as opposed to a bad guy with a gun, because the good guy with the gun is going to be able to deal with the bad guy with the gun. We're not going to get it. AGI, similar thing. Someone's got to be there first. And I think there's going to be some big negatives with it. There's going to be a lot of fear. There's going to be a lot of, I think, unrest and protests and whatnot around it. But things like a doctor, an online doctor for all, from a diagnosis perspective, to be able to have the sum total of human knowledge available on that side and be able to give a solid opinion. I think that would be wonderful for healthcare. People could talk about things that they're not comfortable talking to their doctor about. Get in earlier.
Yeah.
You know,
If I want a solid opinion, I ask my wife.
and then you listen and say, yes, dear.
Well trained.
Yep.
I am apparently I'm a work in progress.
Yes, so am I. Don't worry about it, Ian.
Happily so. Happily so.
All right, can we wrap
Amazing.
up? I think this was awesome. Thanks everyone for coming and getting involved and joining in. And Gordon, I'll chat to you about all the follow-ups.
Yep. We'll run through all those and away we go.